Since December, Pakistan has been rocked by a series of suicide bombings. One of the most devastating happened in late March when a powerful bomb ripped through a crowded park in the provincial capital Lahore, killing dozens of women and children. A faction of the Pakistani Taliban known as Jamaat-ur-Ahrar claimed responsibility for the attack. In response, the government has launched another major offensive against extremist groups in the country's most populous province of Punjab. We begin with CCTV's Daniel Khan in Islamabad. Daniel, let's start with this group, Jamaat-ur-Ahrar. What can you tell us about this group?
Well, Anand, Jamaat-ul-Ahrar is a breakaway faction of the Taliban Pakistan. Now, this splinter group has launched several attacks on civilians and security forces in an attempt to boost its profile among Pakistan's militants that have been hit by a full-fledged military operation in Pakistan's tribal areas since the year 2014. Now, Umar Khorasani is the head of Jamaat-ul-Ahrar and a former leader of the Taliban Pakistan. He established this splinter group in 2014 after he was overthrown by Mullah Fazlullah, the current Taliban Pakistan chief. Now, following internal, there were a lot of differences amongst the different factions of the Taliban. Now, this faction claims to be fighting for the establishment of Sharia in Pakistan and has some support in the tribal areas. Now, the latest attack was the deadliest since the December 2014 massacre of 134 children at the Army Public School in Peshawar by the Taliban. And this attack has driven Pakistan's civil military leadership to take on the terrorists and their facilitators, not only in the tribal areas, but also in other cities of Pakistan.
Daniel, after the Lahore attack, Pakistan's military and police conducted raids in search of terrorists. Has that operation had any success? And is there any concern that there could be retaliatory attacks against the Pakistani people for these raids?
Well, certainly, Anand, experts believe that a reaction is inevitable and these terrorists often hit soft targets. Now, reportedly, Ehsanullah Ehsan, the spokesperson for Jamaat-ul-Ahrar, has warned Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, saying that the group has entered Lahore, which is the capital of the most populous Punjab province and the political power base of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his family. The military and the paramilitary rangers have launched joint raids against militants in central and southern regions of the Punjab province, and hundreds of suspects and their facilitators have been arrested. And Prime Minister Sharif has said that militants with political connections will be treated even more severely. Now, we know that the operation in the city of Karachi already gave powers to the paramilitary to conduct raids and arrests, which experts say was a strategy that has brought stability in the city after years of violence and lawlessness, and they believe that such operations are going to bring stability in the province of Punjab as well.
Thanks, Daniel. That's CCTV's Daniel Khan reporting from Islamabad. Joining us now in our Washington, D.C. studio is Farhana Kazi. She's a scholar, public speaker, and the author of Secrets of the Kashmir Valley. From Islamabad, we're joined by Sultan Mahmood Ali. He's a veteran of the Pakistan Air Force and a television host with PTV News. Also with us in Washington is Ali Imran. He's the managing editor of Views and News magazine and a columnist with Pakistan Today. And from Ithaca, New York, via Skype, we're joined by Raza Rumi. He's a policy analyst, journalist, and author from Pakistan. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Farhana, let me start with you. We look at this devastating attack at a park in Lahore in Pakistan. Dozens of people killed. What do you think was the motive behind the attack?
I think the motives are pretty clear and also consistent with the movement of the Taliban. Even though the perpetrators of this attack are a splinter group from the larger umbrella movement, the objectives have always been the same, and that is to destabilize the Pakistani establishment in order to incite fear throughout the country. And by destabilizing the government, these local jihadi groups see themselves as legitimate organizations. And most importantly, it's to create this Islamist utopia, which is very similar to what Daesh or ISIS has wanted, was to create an Islamic government in Pakistan. That is not only the group of the movement of Taliban, but has also been a consistent policy and a political objective of other groups, even Al-Qaeda, which has threatened the Pakistan establishment. But the greater challenge is, how do these groups intend to do that? And this kind of destabilization raises other serious, important counterterrorism challenges for the country at the moment.
Ali, we heard a little bit about this group that has claimed responsibility from our reporter. The group is called Jamaat-ur-Ahrar. What else do we know about groups like this? They seem to want to outdo each other on the level of violence they can perpetrate on civilians.
Yes, the TTP, as we know it, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, it has been waging...
That's the Taliban in Pakistan.
Yes, in Pakistan. It has been waging an insurgency against the Pakistani state for the last about 8-9 years. And this is a splinter group, and it's, the Taliban TTP has splintered into various groups, and this is one of the groups. And its leader, Omar Khalid Khorasan, is said to be hiding in Afghanistan. They also carried out attacks, high-profile attacks in the recent past. And as Farhana said, that their aim is to destabilize and establish their, fear and their hateful ideology to, in the name of religion, Islam, to advance their objectives, which are literalist interpretations of Islam, and they want to impose Sharia as with other militant organizations.
Sultan, in 2014, the Pakistan Taliban attacked an army school in Peshawar, and that caused the deaths of more than 140 people. The government responded at the time with its own action plan and said that it was going to take on these terrorists. What does this latest attack tell us about that action plan? Is it working? Has it failed?
Well, the National Action Plan was long overdue in coming, and it took a dastardly attack like the one on the Army Public School to actually galvanize the people, as well as get the government into motion to announce the National Action Plan. But my personal belief is that the National Action Plan was formulated in a little bit of a hurry, and there are 20 points to it, but not more than 3 or 4 have been actually executed. And the government is found lacking in most of them. The ones which are actually in action are the ones for which the Pakistan Army was responsible. The civilians have been lacking in spirit or perhaps the will to go ahead, because they fear a backlash from the extremist Islamic groups and even some of the Islamic political parties. And this has caused a serious damage to the government and the national plan to actually carry out a serious attack or seriously address the issue of terrorism in Pakistan. And now, unless the government gets its act together and not only, revisits the National Action Plan, because it requires a feedback, it requires retuning, it requires a consideration to see exactly what you just asked me, whether it's working or whether it's a failure, and which aspects need a course correction. But that is lacking for the time being. And the attack which you mentioned earlier, which our two other participants talked about at Lahore, has moved, again, not the government, but the army into action, into going into the heartland of Punjab. But apparently the army met with a little bit of resistance from the political forces. So the government and the political parties, they have to be on the same page to be able to attack or tackle the scourge of terrorism.
Raza, here we have a situation where the Pakistani government is facing a major challenge. It's decided that it's going to take this war to the militants. It's going to take the war to the extremists. Is there a danger here that in response, these extremists carry out terrorist attacks against civilians, against soft targets?
Yes, indeed, there is a danger, and that is one of the considerations by the politicians, as was said earlier. But the problem is that this action cannot be delayed any further, because Pakistan has brutally suffered. More than 60,000 people have died in the past decade, and some of the key areas of National Action Plan, such as the regulation of seminaries, their registration and their regulation, because they are the ones that provide the manpower and the ideological basis for the terrorist groups to carry out these heinous attacks. So that cannot be delayed any further, and there are ways to tackle the backlash as well. But I think what is perhaps not going on is that the political will that we need and the kind of understanding between the military and the civilian leadership that needs to be cemented further. There is a problem over there.
Farhana, getting to the point on where these groups get their support from, the British news magazine The Economist says that religious groups like the one that carried out this attack in Lahore have been cultivated for years in Pakistan with Saudi Arabian money at religious schools, or as they're known, madrasas. Do you believe that to be the case?
But what I do think is true is that there is a culture of intolerance that has been breeding inside Pakistan for a very long time, and that cultural mindset has to change. And so the attack on Sunday was not just an attack against the Christian community. I mean, Christians have been attacked before. Last year there was an attack against a colony of Christians who killed about a dozen people, and then attacks on churches. But so it's really an internal debate. There's an internal divide in Pakistan right now where Muslims have been killing Muslims. That sectarian tension has gone on far too long, and some of these groups, as Razan and some of the other experts have said here, which have been thrived, these local jihadi groups have also thrived in southern Punjab. And I think the other issue I'd like to raise is that this is, there's willingness and there's also capability. For a very long time, Pakistan has conducted counterterrorism operations in places like Waziristan and the Swat Valley, and mostly in the tribal belt, and that's where their attention and focus has been. But there's been very little, as Raza mentioned, very little political willingness to actually look at some of the proliferation of these very extreme madrasas and seminaries. I mean, to be fair, Pakistan has taken them on when it is when these madrasas have taken on the establishment, and there's been a direct threat against the establishment. But by and large, I mean, this is an issue that is deeply entrenched inside the society. So it's not just local jihadi groups inside Pakistan, which have proliferated and become more decentralized with time, but it's also these seminaries and this cultural and religious mindset that needs to change.
But very quickly, tell me, was this an attack on a religious minority in Pakistan? Because there were many Muslims who were killed in that attack.
Absolutely.
As well.
And so I think that it's a fair point, and people have, even though people would like to, focus on the Christian minority, Muslims have also been killed, and more importantly, it was an attack on the establishment. The fact that it occurred in Lahore. I mean, when attacks were occurring in Pakistan for many years outside of the major cities, it was really less of a concern for, I think, the general population. But I think people become very disenchanted and disillusioned and, quite frankly, disgusted when attacks take place in cities like Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad.
All right, and Ali, if we look at the... Sorry, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Continuing Farhana's point, this attack was pretty much in the cultural heart of Pakistan. So the battle and the war that Pakistani state and Pakistani society are waging against militancy is for the soul of Pakistan. And if Pakistan has to succeed in this fight against militancy, the militant mindset and extremism, it has to be won on the plains of Punjab. Because, some of the militants who were targeted by the Pakistani security forces during the Zarb-e-Azb operation in North Waziristan and other parts of the tribal agencies, some of them have made their way into Pakistani cities, and especially in the southern part of Punjab, and which has long been a hotbed of sectarian terrorism and militant organizations which operate in the name of militancy. And then there are long-standing issues like governance issues. The state has been able to proscribe, has banned organizations, but now and then they again emerge with different names. Then they collect money, contributions from people, and they are able to carry out these attacks. Then there are larger political issues in the region.
Right,
as well.
But when you talk about success, how the Pakistani government overcomes groups like the ones we're seeing in Pakistan right now, the government tried to negotiate with the Taliban. It abandoned those efforts in 2014 and opted for a military option. Is there a military solution to this?
This had, at the immediate solution that comes to mind and which looks very much practical and plausible is that the government, the civilian security forces and the military forces, they have to move in tandem to at least, nab those people, shut down their business, and also at the same time suck out the oxygen from, that is, they collect money in the name of religion, and they try to hide behind the mask of civil, service to the people, like charities, and the immediate, of course, is kinetic operations. But in the long term, as the National Action Plan lays out, we have to fight the militant mindsets. And that has a lot to do with a lot of factors, like mainstreaming the madrasa education. And a lot of madrasas are located in this part of Punjab, and according to a report, half of them are not even registered, So the government has to move